Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him. The numbers made no sense. After 18 months of traveling through space, they had found something impossible. A signal, not from Earth, not from any human ship, but from something else entirely. Captain Hayes, you need to see this, Jake called across the bridge of the UES Valiant. His hands shook slightly as he pointed to the readings on his console. The signal was strong, clear, and definitely not natural. Captain Susan Hayes walked over, her boots clicking on the metal floor. She was a tall woman with gray hair tied back in a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. What do you have, Morrison? It's a distress signal, but the pattern is wrong. It's not using any human codes or frequencies we know. Jake touched the screen where strange symbols scrolled past. The computer can't translate it, but the mathematical base suggests intelligence. High intelligence. Dr. Lisa Barnes looked up from her workstation nearby. She was younger than they. Captain, with brown hair and curious eyes that always seemed to be studying something. Are you saying we found aliens? Jake nodded slowly. That's exactly what I'm saying. The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Everyone knew this moment would come eventually. Humanity had been searching the stars for decades, hoping to find other life. But now that they had found it, nobody knew what to do. Captain Hayes studied the data for several minutes. The signal was coming from a solar system 3 days away. At their current speed, the system had 5 planets, and the signal originated from the third one. Set course for the source, she finally said, and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we have made first contact. 3 days later, the Valiant arrived at a dying world. The planet was covered in smoke and fire. Great cities lay in ruins across its surface. From orbit, they could see massive explosions happening every few minutes. Whatever was down there was fighting a war and losing badly. My God, Dr. Barnes whispered as she studied the planet through the ship's sensors. The entire ecosystem is collapsing. Something is destroying everything alive down there. Jake watched the tactical display with growing horror. The planet's surface showed signs of advanced civilization, but also widespread destruction. Captain, I'm reading multiple energy signatures. There are at least 2 different types of technology fighting each other down there. Before Captain Hayes could respond, a new signal appeared on their screens. This one was much stronger and coming directly at them. Jake's console lit up with warnings as dozens of ships appeared from behind the planet's largest moon. Incoming vessels, Jake announced, trying to keep his voice steady. 37 ships of unknown design. They're moving fast. The alien ships were unlike anything humans had ever built. They looked organic, almost alive, with smooth curves and what appeared to be breathing ports along their sides. Each ship was roughly the size of the Valiant, but they moved with a grace that human ships could never match. Are they hostile? Captain Hayes asked. Jake checked his readings. They have weapons, but they haven't powered them up yet. They're just surrounding us. Dr. Barnes was already working on her equipment. I'm trying to establish communication. If we can find a common mathematical language, maybe we can talk to them. For 20 minutes, the alien ships held position around the Valiant. Then, without warning, one of them sent a tight beam transmission directly to their communications array. The message was simple. Coordinates on the planet's surface and what appeared to be landing instructions. They want us to come down, Jake translated. I think they're inviting us to meet them. Captain Hayes considered their options. They were completely outnumbered and far from any help. But they had come this far to make contact with alien life. Prepare the shuttle. Morrison, Barnes, Rodriguez, you're with me. We're going down. Chief Engineer Alex Rodriguez was a stocky man with steady hands and a practical mind. He had been quiet during the approach, but now he spoke up. Captain, with respect, we don't know anything about these beings. They could be planning to capture us. That's a risk we have to take. Hayes replied, "This is why we came out here." The shuttle trip to the planet's surface took 30 minutes. As they descended through the atmosphere, they could see the devastation more clearly. Entire continents were scarred with what looked like bite marks kilometers wide. Strange, twisted structures covered the landscape like cancer growths. Landing site was in what appeared to be a military base. As their shuttle touched down, Jake could see alien soldiers waiting for them. His first sight of the beings made his blood run cold. They stood nearly 3 meters tall on powerful legs that ended in clawed feet. Their bodies were covered in natural armor that looked like black chitin. Each alien had 4 arms, and every arm ended in hands with fingers that were more like razor-sharp knives. Their heads were elongated with multiple eyes and mouths full of teeth that could tear through metal. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez whispered. "They look like something from a nightmare." Dr. Barnes was fascinated rather than frightened. Incredible. They're clearly evolved predators. Look at those claws, those teeth. They're built for killing. The largest of the aliens stepped forward as the humans exited their shuttle. When it spoke, a translation device on its chest converted the sounds into rough English. "I am War Prime Kethra of the Zephyrian Defense Force. You are the ones who answered our signal?" Captain Hayes stepped forward, trying not to show her fear. These beings could tear her apart without effort, but she had to project strength. "I am Captain Susan Hayes of the United Earthship Valiant. We received your distress call and came." To help, Kethra's multiple eyes studied the humans with obvious disgust. "Help. You are soft shells. Weak. Pathetic. Look at you. No claws, no armor, no natural weapons. How could such feeble beings help the Zephyrian Empire?" Jake felt anger rising in his chest. They had traveled across the galaxy to answer this alien's call for help, and now it was insulting them. But Captain Hayes remained calm. "We may not look like much to you, but we have our own strengths. What are you fighting against?" Kethra gestured toward the smoking ruins in the distance. "The Devourers, a plague that consumes worlds. They arrived 6 months ago and have been destroying everything. They eat the living and turn them into more of themselves. Soon there will be nothing left of Kethvar." Dr. Barnes stepped forward. "Can we see one of these Devourers? If we can study them, maybe we can help you fight them." The alien's laugh was a harsh, grating sound. "You want to study them? They have destroyed 12 star systems. They have eaten entire worlds. And you soft shells think you can help us?" Kethra looked at his fellow warriors, who made sounds that might have been laughter, but then the War Prime's expression changed. "However, we are desperate. My people are dying. If you truly wish to help, perhaps we can use you as ... bait." Captain Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. "What exactly are you suggesting? Join our next attack. If you survive, perhaps you can prove that soft shells have some value. If you die, at least you will have served a purpose." Jake looked at his captain. The smart thing would be to return to their ship and leave this system. These aliens clearly saw humans as inferior beings, and the enemy they were fighting sounded impossibly dangerous. But something in Kethra's voice told him that the Zephyrians were truly desperate. "I'll do it," Jake heard himself saying. "I'll fight with you." Everyone turned to stare at him. Captain Hayes looked shocked. "Morrison, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Jake interrupted. "If these Devourers are as dangerous as they say, and if they're spreading to other worlds, then Earth could be next. We need to learn how to fight them. And the only way to do that is to see them in action." Kethra studied Jake with new interest. "You would fight beside us, Softshell, even knowing you will likely die?" Jake nodded, surprised by his own courage. "I would." For the first time, something like respect flickered in the alien's multiple eyes. "Very well. Tomorrow we attack their largest nest. You will come with us, and we will see what humans can do when they face the Devourers." As the sun set over the dying world of Kethvar, Jake Morrison prepared to become the first human. to fight alongside beings he had initially seen as monsters. He had no idea that soon he would discover what real monsters looked like. Jake Morrison woke up on a bed that was too hard and too big for a human body. His back ached from sleeping on the stone slab that the Zephyrians called furniture. Around him, alien warriors were already moving, their 4 arms working to strap on weapons and armor. The Zephyrian barracks looked more like a cave than a military building. The walls were rough stone, and everything smelled like metal and something Jake couldn't identify. Maybe it was the scent of the aliens themselves. "Soft shell, you move too slowly," growled a voice behind him. Jake turned to see Velther, a scarred Zephyrian veteran with deep cuts across his chitinous face. One of his eyes was missing, replaced by a mechanical device that glowed red in the dim light. "The hunt begins soon. If you cannot keep up, you will die." Jake stood up and reached for the armor they had given him. It was modified Zephyrian gear, but it still didn't fit right. The chest piece was too wide, and the arm guards were made for beings with 4 limbs, not 2. "I'll keep up," he said. Velther made a sound that might have been laughter. "We shall see, Weak One." Another Zephyrian approached them. This one was smaller than the others, but moved with deadly grace. Her name was Quinara, and Jake had learned she was considered one of their best fighters, despite being young by their standards. Her chitinous armor was painted with red markings that showed her kills. "The human still lives," she said, studying. Jake with bright yellow eyes. "I thought surely you would have fled in the night." "I don't run from fights," Jake replied, checking his human-made rifle. The weapon looked small and fragile compared to the massive blades and energy weapons the Zephyrians carried. Quinara tilted her head. "That thing will not save you when the Devourers come. They move faster than your eyes can follow. They tear through metal like paper. Your little stick weapon will be useless." Before Jake could respond, War Prime Kethra entered the barracks. The massive alien leader wore full battle armor that made him look even more frightening than before. His 4 arms each carried a different weapon: 2 energy blades, a plasma cannon, and a weapon Jake didn't recognize. "The nest has been located," Kethra announced to his warriors. "Intelligence reports show at least 300 Devourers defending it. We will attack at dawn." His multiple eyes found Jake in the crowd. "Human, you will stay close to me. When you die, I want to see how soft shells face death." The other Zephyrians made their harsh laughing sounds. Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he said nothing. He would prove himself when the fighting started out 2 hours later. Jake found himself crouched in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city. The buildings around them were twisted and wrong, covered in a black substance that seemed to move on its own. The smell was terrible, like rotting meat and chemicals mixed together. "The Devourers change everything they touch," Kethra explained quietly. "They do not just kill. They corrupt. They turn our own world against us." Jake could see the enemy nest in the distance. It looked like a massive tumor growing out of the ground, pulsing with sickly light. Hundreds of dark shapes moved around it, the Devourers themselves. Even from this distance, Jake could see they were wrong in ways that made his mind hurt to think about. "How do we attack something like that?" Jake whispered. Velther snorted. "We attack like Zephyrians have always attacked, with honor, with strength. We charge the enemy and tear them apart with our claws." "That seems like a good way to get killed," Jake said before he could stop himself. The scarred veteran turned to glare at him. "Spoken like a true coward. This is why soft shells will never be warriors. You think too much. You fear too much. A true warrior acts on instinct." Quinara was studying the nest through a scope. "The Devourers have changed since our last attack. They look different, bigger. Their armor is thicker." Kethra nodded grimly. "They learn from each battle. They adapt. This is why they are so dangerous." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. An enemy that could adapt and change its tactics was every soldier's nightmare. How many times have you attacked this nest? This will be the fourth. Assault, Kethra replied. Each time, we have failed to break through their defenses. Each time, we lose more warriors. Then maybe it's time to try a different approach, Jake suggested. The Zephyrians all turned to stare at him. Velther S. Remaining eye blazed with anger. Different approach? Are you suggesting we fight without honor? That we use cowards' tactics? I'm suggesting we use tactics that work, Jake shot back. If charging straight at them hasn't worked 3 times, why do you think it will work now? Kethra raised one of his 4 hands for silence. Speak, human. What would you do differently? Jake pointed to the nest. Look at their defenses. They're set up to handle a direct assault. All their heavy weapons are facing this direction. But what about the back? What about the sides? The sides are protected by cliffs and deep ravines, Quinara said. No warrior could approach from those directions. No Zephyrian warrior, Jake. Agreed, but humans use different tools, different methods. He pulled out a small device from his equipment pack. It was a human climbing kit with ropes, hooks, and magnetic anchors. We don't have to be stronger than our enemies if we can be. Smarter. Velther made a disgusted sound. Tools, machines. This is not how warriors fight. But it might be how warriors win, Kethra said thoughtfully. The War Prime studied Jake's equipment with interest. Show me how this works, human. For the next hour, Jake explained human military tactics. He talked about flanking maneuvers, suppression fire, and coordinated attacks. The Zephyrians listened with growing confusion and disgust. You fight like insects, Velther finally spat. Hiding, sneaking, using tricks instead of strength. Where is the honor in this? There's no honor in dying uselessly, Jake replied. And there's no honor in letting your enemy win because you're too proud to change your tactics. Quinara was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. The human has a point. We have lost many good warriors charging into their weapons. Perhaps it is time to try something new. Never, Velther growled. I would rather die with honor than live as a coward. You might get your wish, Jake said, pointing toward the nest. The Devourers had noticed their presence and were beginning to move. Hundreds of dark shapes were pouring out of the tumor-like structure, heading straight for their position. Kethra stood up, his weapons ready. The choice is made for us. They come to us. He looked at Jake. Stay close, human. Try not to die. Too quickly. Jake checked his rifle one more time and took a deep breath. The approaching Devourers looked like nightmares made real. They moved on too many legs, with too many mouths full of teeth. Their bodies seemed to shift and change as they ran, adapting even as he watched. Here they come, Quinara said, her voice filled with excitement rather than fear. Jake watched the Zephyrians prepare for battle. Each warrior stood alone, ready to face the enemy with individual courage and strength. They were magnificent and terrifying, like ancient gods of war. But as the Devourers got closer, Jake could see that courage alone might not be enough. The enemy moved with coordination that the Zephyrians lacked. They supported each other, covered each other's weaknesses, and attacked as a unified force. This is how they keep winning, Jake realized. They fight as a team while you fight as individuals. But it was too late for tactics now. The Devourers were almost upon them, and Jake was about to get his first real look at the enemy that was consuming the galaxy. He raised his rifle and prepared to see what humans could do when fighting alongside monsters. The first Devourer that reached their position was the size of a small car. It had too many legs, too many teeth, and skin that seemed to shift and move like liquid. Jake raised his rifle and fired 3 quick shots into its center mass. Bullets hit, but the creature barely slowed down. Weapons are useless, Velther roared as he leaped over Jake's head. The scarred Zephyrian landed on the Devourer with all 4 arms extended. His claws tore through the creature's hide like paper, spilling black blood across the ground. The devourer screamed and died, but 2 more were already taking its place. Jake had never seen anything like the battle that followed. The Zephyrians fought with a fury that seemed to come from somewhere beyond reason. They moved like living weapons, their claws and teeth ripping through enemy after enemy. Quinara danced between 3 devourers, her 4 arms working in perfect coordination to slice them apart. Kethra moved through the battle like a force of nature, his weapons cutting down anything that came near him. But for every devourer they killed, 2 more appeared. The creatures seemed to learn from watching their companions die. Jake saw one devourer avoid Velther's claws by growing thicker armor in exactly the right places. Another changed its attack pattern after seeing how Quinara had killed its pack. "Mate, they're adapting," Jake shouted over the noise of battle. "They're learning from our attacks." Kethra split a devourer in half with his energy blade, then turned to Jake. "Then we kill them faster than they can learn." Jake fired his rifle at a creature that was trying to flank them. This time he aimed for what looked like sensory organs instead of the center mass. The shots found their mark, and the creature stumbled. Giving Velther time to finish it off, the battle raged for 2 hours. Jake had never seen such violence, such raw fury. The Zephyrians were incredible fighters, but they were fighting as individuals. Each warrior battled alone, seeking personal glory and honor. They didn't coordinate their attacks or support each other in any organized way. The Devourers, on the other hand, moved like a single organism. They surrounded isolated Zephyrians. They covered each other's retreats, and they shared information about their enemies' fighting styles. Jake watched in horror as the alien strategy began to work. "Velther, look out!" Jake yelled as 3 Devourers moved to surround the scarred veteran. But Velther was already engaged with 2 other enemies and couldn't hear the warning over. The sound of battle. Jake ran toward the veteran, firing his rifle as he moved. The bullets didn't do much damage, but they distracted the Devourers low enough for Velther to notice the trap. The old warrior spun around and caught the first attacker with his claws, but the other 2 were already moving. "Behind you," Jake shouted, but it was too late. One of the Devourers landed on Velther's back and sank its teeth into his shoulder. The veteran roared in pain and rage, but the creature held on. Jake did something that surprised even himself. He dropped his rifle and pulled out his combat knife. The blade was small compared to Zephyrian claws, but it was sharp, and he knew how to use it. He jumped onto the Devourer's back and drove the knife into what looked like its neck. The creature released Velther and spun around to face Jake. Up close, Jake could see that its face was a nightmare of moving parts. Teeth that rearranged themselves, eyes that split and multiplied, skin that flowed like water. The thing was adapting, even as he looked at it, trying to figure out how to kill him. Jake didn't give it time to adapt. He pulled his knife free and stabbed again, this time aiming for the cluster of eyes. The devourer screamed and thrashed, but Jake held on. He had learned something important about these creatures. They were deadly, but they needed time to adapt to new threats. Velther recovered quickly and finished off the wounded devourer with a single swipe of his claws. He turned to Jake with something like respect in his remaining eye. "You saved my life, Softshell. Just returning the favor," Jake said, picking up his rifle. But as he looked around the battlefield, he realized they were losing. The Zephyrians were magnificent warriors, but they were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers and superior tactics. "We need to fall back," Jake said to Kethra during a brief lull in the fighting. The War Prime's multiple eyes blazed with anger. "Zephyrians do not retreat. We fight until victory or death." "Then you're going to get a lot of death," Jake replied bluntly. "Look around you. We're surrounded. They're picking us off one by one." Kethra looked at the battlefield, and Jake could see the truth sinking in. They had started with 50 warriors. Now there were maybe 30 left, and more were falling every minute. The Devourers had lost hundreds, but they had thousands more coming from the nest. "What do you suggest, human?" Kethra asked through gritted teeth. Jake thought quickly. "We need to change the rules of engagement. Stop fighting their battle, and start fighting ours." "Speak plainly," Quinara said as she joined them. Her armor was cracked and bleeding, but she was still fighting. "The Devourers expect us to fight like Zephyrians. Individual combat, honor duels, direct confrontation. But what if we didn't?" Jake pointed to a cluster of ruined buildings nearby. "What if we used the terrain? What if we fought like humans?" Velther limped over to them, his wounded shoulder still bleeding. "More cowards' tactics? Smart tactics," Jake corrected. "The kind that keep warriors alive to fight another day." Kethra was quiet for a moment, thinking. Around them, the remaining Zephyrians continued their desperate battle. "Show me," he finally said. Jake led them toward the ruined buildings, firing his rifle to keep the Devourers at a distance. "See how they follow us? They're used to Zephyrians, standing and fighting. They don't know how to handle a fighting retreat." Once they reached the buildings, Jake positioned the Zephyrians at different levels and angles. "Don't engage them directly. Use hit-and-run tactics. Attack, then fall back. Make them come to us on our terms. This is not how warriors fight." Velther protested, but his voice lacked conviction. He was tired and wounded, and the old tactics clearly weren't working. "It's how survivors fight," Jake replied. "And right now, survival is more important than honor." The new tactics worked better than Jake had hoped. The Devourers were confused by the change in strategy. They were adapted to fight Zephyrians, who stood their ground and fought to the death. They didn't know how to handle enemies who attacked, and then disappeared, who used the ruins as cover and struck from unexpected angles. Quinara was the first to really understand what Jake was teaching them. She used her natural agility to move between different positions, striking at the Devourers and then vanishing before they could adapt to her attacks. "This is like hunting," she said with excitement. "We are the predators now, not the prey." Even Velther began to see the value in the new approach. His wounds made it hard for him to fight in the traditional Zephyrian style, but he could still use his experience and cunning to set traps and ambushes. But their success was temporary. Jake could see more Devourers pouring out of the nest, and these ones looked different. They were bigger, more heavily armored, and they moved with the coordination of a military unit rather than a pack of animals. "They're adapting to our new tactics," Jake realized with growing horror. "They're learning to fight like us." Kethra followed Jake's gaze and saw the new wave of enemies approaching. "How is this possible? They learn so quickly." Dr. Barnes' voice crackled through Jake's communicator. She was still aboard the Valiant, monitoring the battle from orbit. "Jake, are you there? I've been studying the Devourer specimens we captured. I think I know why they adapt so fast." "Tell me," Jake said, ducking behind cover as energy bolts flew overhead. "They're not just adapting individually. They're sharing information through some kind of biological network. Every Devourer that sees a new tactic instantly shares that knowledge with all the others. They're like a hive mind, but worse. They're a learning hive mind." Jake felt his blood run cold. An enemy that could instantly share tactical knowledge across their entire force was almost impossible to defeat. No matter what strategy they used, the Devourers would adapt to it within minutes. "There has to be a weakness," Jake said desperately. "Nothing is perfect." "I'm working on it," Dr. Barnes replied. "But right now, you need to get out of there. The new wave of Devourers is almost at your position." Jake looked at the approaching enemies and knew she was right. These creatures had adapted to counter every tactic the Zephyrians had used, including the human-style fighting he had taught them. They were out of options. "We need to retreat," he told Kethra. "Full retreat, back to the base." For a moment, Jake thought the War Prime would refuse. The idea of retreat went against everything the Zephyrians believed in. But then Kethra looked at his remaining warriors, barely 20 left out of 50, and nodded grimly. "Fall back," he ordered. "All units, fall back to base." As they retreated, Jake couldn't help but think about what Dr. Barnes had discovered. The Devourers weren't just strong or fast or vicious. They were intelligent, adaptive, and they shared knowledge instantly across their entire species. How could anyone fight an enemy like that? Behind them, the new wave of Devourers had reached. The battlefield. Jake looked back and saw them examining the area where the fight had taken place. Jake Morrison sat in the Zephyrian Command Center, staring at the tactical displays with growing despair. The news from across the galaxy was getting worse by the hour. 3 more star systems had gone dark in the past week. The Devourers were spreading faster than anyone had imagined possible. "The Korthic Empire has fallen," announced Communications Officer Pete Johnson through the speakers. His voice was coming from the Valiant, still in orbit above the dying planet. Their entire fleet was destroyed in less than 6 hours. The Devourers used new tactics we've never seen before. War Prime Kethra slammed one of his 4 fists onto the table. How is this possible? The Korthak had the strongest military force in this sector. Dr. Barnes' voice joined the conversation. The Devourers are sharing tactical knowledge across interstellar distances. Every battle they fight, every strategy they encounter, every weakness they discover, it's transmitted to their entire species. Instantly. They're not just learning from local encounters anymore. Jake rubbed his tired eyes. They had been planning their next attack for 3 days, but every strategy they developed seemed useless. How do you fight an enemy that knows everything you're going to do before you do it? Velthar, his shoulder still bandaged from their last battle, looked up from cleaning his weapons. "We die with honor. That is all that remains for warriors." "No." Captain Hayes' voice cut through the speakers with sharp authority. "That's not all that remains. Pete, patch me through to Earth Command. Authorization code Alpha 77. Jake heard typing in the background, then Pete's voice returned. "Connection established, Captain. You're speaking directly to Admiral Shun at Earth Defense Command. Admiral, this is Captain Hayes aboard the Valiant. I'm requesting immediate authorization for Terran Doctrine Alpha." There was a long pause. When the Admiral's voice came through, it was grim. "Captain, are you certain? That protocol was designed for extinction-level scenarios only." "Sir, we're facing an enemy that adapts faster than anything we've encountered. They're consuming entire star systems. If we don't act now, Earth will be next." Another pause. "Authorization granted. God help us all." Jake looked at the Zephyrians. Around him, they were listening to the conversation with confusion. "What is Terran Doctrine Alpha?" Kethra asked. Captain Hayes was quiet for a moment before answering. "It's how humans fight when there are no rules left." Over the next several hours, Jake watched in amazement as his fellow humans transformed the entire operation. Chief Engineer Alex Rodriguez began converting the Valiant's engines into something Jake didn't recognize. Dr. Barnes worked with samples of Devourer tissue, creating weapons that made Jake's stomach turn just thinking about them. "What are they doing up there?" Quinara asked as she watched the activity on the tactical screens. "They're preparing to fight like humans," Jake replied, though he wasn't entirely sure what that meant himself. The first sign of change came when Lieutenant Sarah Kim beamed down to the planet with a team of human soldiers Jake had never seen. Before, they wore different uniforms and carried equipment that looked nothing like standard military gear. "Morrison," Kim called as she approached. "Captain Hayes wants you to coordinate with the Zephyrians. We're implementing full-spectrum warfare protocols." "What does that mean?" Jake asked. Kim's smile was cold. "It means we're going to fight dirty." The human soldiers set up equipment that Jake barely recognized. Some of it looked like communications gear, but other devices seemed designed for purposes he couldn't identify. When he asked about them, Kim just said they were psychological warfare tools. Dr. Barnes beamed down next, carrying a container that she handled with extreme care. Jake, I need to show the Zephyrians something. It might disturb them. She opened the container to reveal what looked like a devourer, but something was wrong with it. The creature was alive, but acting strangely. Instead of the coordinated, intelligent behavior they had seen before, it was attacking itself, biting its own limbs and making sounds of distress. What did you do to it? Kethra asked, his multiple eyes studying the creature with fascination and horror. I created a virus, Dr. Barnes explained calmly. Not one that kills them. That would be too simple. This virus attacks their ability to share information. It makes them receive false signals from other devourers. They think they're getting tactical updates, but instead, they're getting instructions to attack each other. Velther backed away from the container. This is ... unnatural. Weapons should kill enemies, not drive them mad. Sometimes madness is more effective than death, Dr. Barnes replied. A dead enemy is just dead. A confused enemy becomes a weapon. Against its own kind. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen human military technology before, but this was different. This was war without any concept of honor or fair play. It was purely about winning, no matter the cost. Sergeant Mike Chun arrived with another team of humans carrying different equipment. Morrison, we need to set up observation posts around the Devourer nest. We're going to map their communication patterns. For what purpose? Kethra asked. Sean's expression was grim. So we can hijack their network and feed them false information. Make them think they're coordinating attacks when actually they're walking into traps. Quinara looked disturbed. You can do this? You can make enemies believe lies? That's what humans do best, Chun replied. We're very good at deception. Over the next day, Jake watched his species reveal capabilities that shocked even him. The humans didn't just fight the Devourers. They studied them, analyzed them, and found ways to turn their greatest strengths against them. Pete Johnson established fake communication signals that mimicked Devourer transmissions. The signals carried tactical information that would lead Devourer forces into ambushes or make them attack empty positions, while the real targets remained safe. Dr. Barnes created biological weapons that were designed not to kill, but to confuse and disorient. Some viruses made Devourers unable to distinguish between allies and enemies. Others caused them to receive false sensory information, making them see threats that didn't exist. Lieutenant Kim coordinated orbital strikes that weren't aimed at destroying Devourer forces, but at disrupting their communication networks. Every time the creatures tried to share information, human jammers would interfere, causing delays and errors in their tactical coordination. But the most disturbing human tactic was what Sergeant Shun called psychological warfare. The humans broadcasted sounds and signals that caused panic among the Devourers. They created false retreat signals that made enemy forces abandon strong positions. They even managed to make some Devourer units believe they were under attack by their own allies. This is not how honorable beings fight, Velther said after watching a demonstration of human deception tactics. Honor is a luxury we can't afford, Jake replied, though he felt uncomfortable with his own words. The Devourers don't fight with honor. They fight to survive and spread. If we want to stop them, we have to fight the same way. Kethra was studying the human operations with growing understanding. Your species does not just fight enemies. You fight the idea of enemies. You attack not just their bodies, but their minds, their ability to think and coordinate. That's right, Captain Hayes said as she beamed down to join them. Humans learned long ago that the most dangerous enemy is a coordinated enemy. Take away their coordination, and even the strongest force becomes vulnerable. The captain carried a device that Jake didn't recognize. This is our final weapon, she explained. We've analyzed the Devourer communication network and found a way to overload it. We can't destroy their ability to share information, but we can flood them with So much false information that they won't be able to tell what's real. Dr. Barnes nodded. We're going to give them sensory overload. Every devourer will receive thousands of conflicting tactical updates simultaneously. They'll be paralyzed by information chaos. Kinara looked amazed and horrified at the same time. You can break their minds without even touching them? The mind is just another battlefield, Captain Hayes replied. And humans have been fighting on that battlefield for thousands of years. Jake watched the preparations with mixed feelings. The human approach was undeniably effective, but it was also cold and calculating in a way that disturbed him. The Zephyrians fought with passion and honor, even when facing impossible odds. Humans fought with pure pragmatism, using whatever methods would bring victory. Are we the good guys in this? Jake asked Captain Hayes privately. She considered the question for a long moment. The Devourers consume entire worlds, Jake. They turn living beings into more of themselves. They're a threat to every form of life in the galaxy. So yes, we're the good guys. But that doesn't mean we're nice guys. As night fell on the dying world of Kethfor, Jake realized he was about to see the full power of human warfare unleashed. Not the clean, honorable combat that the Zephyrians preferred, but something much more ruthless and effective. The humans weren't just going to fight the Devourers. They were going to break them in ways that the creatures had never experienced before. And Jake was beginning to understand that maybe that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Not more honor, but more humans. The final battle began at dawn, but it didn't start with weapons or explosions. It started with silence. Jake Morrison watched from the command post as the human plan unfolded. Dr. Barnes activated her biological weapons, releasing invisible viruses into the air around the Devourer nest. Lieutenant Kim triggered the communication jammers, flooding the enemy network with false signals. Sergeant Shun began broadcasting psychological warfare patterns that would confuse and disorient the creatures. The first time since Jake had arrived on this world, the Devourers seemed uncertain. Look at them, Quinara whispered, pointing toward the nest through her scope. They're not moving in formation anymore. They look confused. She was right. The Devourers that had always moved with perfect coordination were now wandering aimlessly. Some were attacking each other, believing they were fighting enemies. Others were responding to false retreat signals, abandoning defensive positions for no reason. War Prime Kethra studied the scene with amazement. Your people have broken them without firing a shot. Not broken, Captain Hayes corrected through the communicator. Confused. There's a difference. A broken enemy stays down. A confused enemy is still dangerous, just less organized. Jake understood what she meant. The Devourers were still deadly individually, but they had lost their greatest advantage. They could no longer work together as a unified force. The hive mind that had made them so terrifying was now working against them. Phase 2, Captain Hayes announced. Morrison, take your Zephyrian squad and move in. Use the confusion to get close to the nest. But remember, this is not a traditional assault. Jake looked at the aliens around him. Kethra, Velther, and Quinara had all volunteered to join him for the final attack. They were among the best warriors their species had to offer, but they were about to fight in a way that went against everything they believed in. We attack together, Jake told them. Not as individual warriors seeking glory, but as a team. We support each other, we coordinate our moves, and we use every dirty trick the humans have taught us. Velther still looked uncomfortable with the idea. This feels wrong. Warriors should face their enemies with honor. These aren't enemies. We can beat with honor alone, Jake replied. Sometimes survival is more important than tradition. They moved toward the nest using human tactics Jake had learned during his training. They stayed low, used cover, and avoided direct confrontation whenever possible. When they did encounter Devourers, they used hit-and-run attacks instead of standing and fighting. The difference was immediately obvious. The confused Devourers couldn't coordinate their responses. When Jake's team attacked one group, the creatures couldn't call for reinforcements because their communication network was flooded with false signals. When the Devourers tried to surround them, Jake used human squad tactics to break through their lines and escape. "This actually works," Quinara said with excitement as they took cover behind a twisted metal structure. "Fighting like humans is effective." Kethra was adapting to the new style faster than Jake had expected. The War Prime used his natural strength and speed, but combined it with human tactical thinking. Instead of charging into battle, he set traps and ambushes. Instead of fighting alone, he coordinated with his team. They reached the outer edge of a nest without losing anyone. Up close, the structure was even more horrifying than it had appeared from a distance. It pulsed with sickly light, and Jake could see movement inside the translucent walls. Thousands of Devourers were still inside, but many of them seemed to be fighting each other. "Dr. Barnes' virus is working," Jake reported through his communicator. "The creatures inside the nest are turning on each other." "Excellent," came the doctor's voice. "Phase 3 is ready. Jake, I need you to plant this device at the base of the nest." A small drone dropped a package near their position. Inside was a device about the size of a briefcase, covered with controls that Jake didn't recognize. "What does it do?" he asked. "It's a communication amplifier," Dr. Barnes explained. "It will boost our false signals and send them directly into the nest's core. Every Devourer inside will receive conflicting orders simultaneously. They'll tear themselves apart." Jake stared at the device. It was elegant in its cruelty. The humans had found a way to turn the Devourer's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The hive mind that had made them so dangerous would now destroy them from within. "This is not war," Velther said quietly. "This is ... something else. This is how humans fight when everything depends on winning," Jake replied. He picked up the device and started moving toward the nest. The next few minutes were the most dangerous of Jake's life. Even confused and disorganized, the Devourers were still deadly. Several times, creatures that seemed to be wandering aimlessly suddenly turned and attacked with vicious speed. But each time, Jake's team worked together to fight them off. Quinara used her speed to distract enemies, while Kethra attacked from another angle. Velther, despite his wounds, provided covering fire with his energy weapons. Jake coordinated their movements, calling out targets and directing their attacks. They fought as a unit, not as individual warriors. And it worked. Jake reached the base of the nest and activated the device. Almost immediately, he could hear the effects. The sounds from inside the structure changed from organized movement to chaos. Screeches, roars, and the sounds of fighting echoed from within. "Device activated," Jake reported. "The nest is tearing itself apart. Time to get out of there," Captain Hayes ordered. "The whole structure is going to collapse." They ran as fast as they could, dodging falling debris and confused Devourers that stumbled out of the dying nest. Behind them, the massive structure was literally eating itself. The creatures inside, driven mad by conflicting signals, were destroying everything they could reach, including each other. When they reached safety, Jake turned to watch the nest's final moments. The entire structure collapsed in on itself, taking thousands of Devourers with it. The creatures that escaped were scattered and leaderless, no longer able to coordinate their actions. "It's over," Quinara said with amazement. "We actually won." But Jake knew it wasn't that simple. This was just one nest. There are thousands more across the galaxy. Not for long, Dr. Barnes announced through the communicator. "We've been uploading our virus and false signal patterns to every allied fleet in the galaxy. Every species that's fighting the Devourers now has access to human psychological warfare techniques." Pete Johnson's voice joined the conversation. "We're already getting reports of success from other systems. The Korthic remnant has retaken 3 worlds using human tactics. The Valyrian Defense Force has stopped a major Devourer advance. Jake felt a mixture of pride and unease. Humanity had found a way to defeat an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. But the methods they had used were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Kethra approached Jake as they walked back toward the base. "Your species fights wars differently than any we have encountered." "How so?" Jake asked. "You do not just defeat enemies. You unmake them. You turn their strengths into weaknesses, their unity into chaos. You fight not just their bodies, but their very nature." Jake nodded. "Humans learned long ago that the deadliest enemy is often the one inside your own head. Fear, confusion, doubt. These can be more powerful than any weapon." Velther, walking beside them, was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "I called you cowards for using tactics instead of strength. But now I understand. You are not cowards. You are something more dangerous than warriors." "What's that?" Jake asked. "Survivors," Velther replied. "Warriors fight until they die with honor. Survivors fight until everyone else dies instead." Over. The following weeks, the tide of the galactic war turned completely. The Devourer advance stopped, then reversed. World after world was liberated as the creatures turned on themselves, driven mad by human psychological warfare. But the victory came with a cost. The other species of the galaxy now looked at humanity with a mixture of gratitude and fear. They had asked for help, and humans had delivered. But the methods used had shown them something about human nature that many found disturbing. Jake found himself in an unusual position. He was a hero to both species, the human who had fought beside monsters and the alien who had learned to fight. Like a human, but he was also a bridge between two very different philosophies of warfare. "What happens now?" Quinara asked him as they stood watching the sunrise over the healing world of Kethver. "Now we rebuild," Jake replied, "but we also prepare. The Devourers might be gone, but there will be other threats. And when they come, we'll be ready. Fighting like humans?" she asked. Jake smiled. "Fighting like whatever we need to be to survive." In the distance, human and Zephyrian soldiers worked together, learning from each other. The monsters had taught humans about courage and honor. The humans had taught the monsters about strategy and survival. Together, they were becoming something new, something that could protect the galaxy from whatever threats might come. They were no longer just individual warriors or calculating soldiers. They were guardians. And that, Jake thought, might be the most human thing of all, not just surviving, but making sure others could survive too. The war was over, but Jake Morrison's real work was just beginning. He had learned to fight beside monsters,